kidnapped. So when you're a war journalist, you spend a lot of time in airports waiting to get on planes. So you buy the books at the airport. Everyone buys books there. And my choice of book at airports was those soldiers' tales, special forces writing about their time of, in war zones. And I remember reading a book by a British special forces soldier who'd been tortured. And he was talking about, and this is an FBI thing. They teach this to soldiers or special forces. So it's much harder. It's much harder to kill a fellow human being than a label. So they teach people who are likely to be kidnapped. The first thing you got to do is impress upon your captors your humanity, that you are like them, because it's much easier to kill a title, a label. Now, so when you say there's this propensity to kill each other and to fight and to hate, well, in fact, that's what, going back to the social media, it's a lot easier to get angry and hate not people, these labels, the other side, the other
screen,
feminist brands, Jews, Muslims, Hamas, because those are all labels. And Fox and CNN scream at each other the hatred, but actually, when you're face to face, so I'd read somewhere and now the Taliban, and I was held in this home that's run by these families. So the Taliban were in the bases; they would come and go, but I was in a family house with 10. It was like a compound. There'd be like 7 men and their multiple wives and children, who I never saw, but I would hear. But I noticed when the Taliban put me, the men who'd come in, it was like a movie. They'd kick open the door, throw the tray of food on the floor, because they saw me not as a human being, but as what the Taliban told them. I was a non-believer. I was a foreign spy. And, I was all the labels they hated. And over time, and I remember having read, it's much harder to kill a fellow human being. So I was very careful. Luckily, I knew about the culture, how you don't get in someone's face and you're polite, but you don't beg. But I slowly, every day, made a real effort. I would get up, greet them in the Islamic way. They started, and I would try and impress, sounds ridiculous, my humanity on them. Talk about your children. And it fucking worked. They start to see me as a human being. And then there was this moment, a real turning point. But I mentioned that because the differences get blown out of all proportion, I think. But once you start seeing people, which is why it's so important to understand the other side, people you disagree with more, that's more important to understand those you hate than your allies and friends. Because that's where the struggle comes. And the moment you see each other as people, now it's much harder to hate, and you start to see the commonalities, and of course they're vast. And it sounds like I'm like your granny saying, "Look, eat your vegetables because there are people starving in the third world." But I spent so much time with people who, these would be real redneck soldiers who love Trump, hated Hillary, hate New York, hate the media, the liberals, they spit on us. Those guys were the kindest, humane, most liberal guys I've met, some of them. More than my New York boss who talks about, or you talk about this New York Times, they'll stab you in the back quicker than anyone. But, and the same with so-called terrorists. But I remember, so if you look in the world and you give people the benefit of the opportunity, see what they're like first, a lot of these differences and the hatred soon really goes away very quickly.